Hi, Gene. Thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Okay, name's Gene Mikulka. I'm currently a resident over in Northwest New Jersey. I currently am the founder and I do host a podcast called Talking Space. We have been doing that now since oh good Lord, since September of 2009, if you can believe it. Um, and I kind of got blessed with a bunch of folks that uh, have just been superior throughout the entire process and are just smart, intelligent, fun, and great folks to hang around with. And I'm all very proud to be associated with them. How I got kind of into the space stuff was when I was a wee little lad, watching the first Apollo missions, and watching a certain Apollo mission, Apollo 11, and seeing the ghostly figure of a black and white Neil Armstrong, you know, taking that first step on the lunar surface. And uh, that's, I guess, when I got bit. My room as a little kid was just about littered with stuff from the government printing office and NASA. A lot of the old posters, which I still have in storage. What else? What else could I tell you? And I guess it was bit ever since. I got into astronomy a little bit. It was kind of tough to do when you're about maybe a stone's throw from New York. But I learned my way around the moon, thankfully, with a mayonnaise jar kind of lens telescope that my dad bought me when I was in sixth grade. But I've since graduated from that and moved on. What else can I tell you? Uh, Anything else you want me to say? I'll be more than happy to do it.
So you mentioned you're a little lad whenever 1969, whenever Neil and Buzz landed on the moon with Apollo 11. Uh, so you're old enough to remember it, but about how old were you?
I was probably about five, 5 years old. Yeah, I was probably about 5 years old in 1969. So
And I guess at what point did it occur to you, wow, we've stopped going to the moon?
probably when Apollo 17 splashed down, that was it. The lunar samples still have stories to tell, and they're still telling them some 50 years plus later. But that's when you first got that inclination. That's it. It's over. Boom. And really, the reasoning was never really articulated very well, at least for a kid in the early 70s. I kind of understood what was going on geopolitically. There was a war going on at that time. And of course, the United States also at that time was in a little bit of a shamble. What was this? 1972. Watergate was about 2 years away. But the still, Kent State had happened in 1970. The United States was literally tearing itself apart, and I guess really we decided to draw in and kind of take care of our own first before we decided to reach out.
Now, you mentioned back in the late 1960s, early 1970s, the United States was tearing itself apart. A lot of people would probably make the observation that it feels at times is doing that today, but it seems like those times may have been worse and more violent. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, you compare Kent State to January 6th, and I mean it's kind of like it's not really an apples to apples comparison. People were against the war in Vietnam. People were burnt, young guys of draft age were burning their draft cards.
Hmm.
This is just sort of what was going on January 6th is kind of like blind faith in one individual. And not that I'm that ilk that I'm going to go ahead and have that kind of blind faith in one individual, but unless they've earned it. But it's sort of fanatical belief in that one individual. So it's not exactly an apples to apples kind of comparison between what was going on in the 1970s and what's going on now. I mean, it's still politics, but it's politics in a different way, where we were protesting our involvement in a war, and we are just protesting the. I don't want to say. I'm gonna just check myself here before I say something a little too political, but we're just kind of having this belief in one individual. So it's not really a good comparison between the two.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, now the NASA tried to go to the moon multiple times before, and
Oh,
it seems like I mean, since Apollo to between Apollo and Artemis, there's been multiple initiatives. The Division of Space Exploration, I think it's called. The whole Constellation program, and then before that there were a couple of attempts
right.
as well.
Right. You're talking about SEI, the Space Exploration Initiative that
Yeah,
was started by, I believe it was Bush 41, back in the late 1980s, or I think it was 1989, in that area. And I may be wrong on the year. Don't quote me. But yeah, what happened there was the funny thing is the architecture, or not the architecture, but the plan was almost the same: go to the moon and then on to Mars. And what happened there was Congress just got sticker shock at $300 billion over 10 years. They just said, yeah, no, we'll just take a rain check on that one. And that pretty much was all she wrote on the Space Exploration Initiative. It's kind of sad because I know you interviewed an acquaintance, Marcia Smith, earlier. She actually worked on the Payne Commission, which essentially, if you're looking for the results of that, pioneering the space frontier, that really mapped out a fairly decent architecture for the time, as far as going to the moon and then on to Mars. So. But unfortunately, it was just not to be. And then we had Constellation. Constellation itself was, kind of ill-fated because it was proposed by, oddly enough, Bush 43, but really didn't receive a lot of love, if you will, from the administration. And unfortunately, I think died of neglect more than anything else. And so that kind of put the end there. I think the incoming Obama administration really put the final nail in the coffin there, as far as Constellation was concerned. But that its cancellation, if you will, kind of started an uproar in Congress, and it wasn't even so much that Congress was pro-space at the time. It was saying that, well, a president canceled a big ticket program without congressional approval, and Congress holds the purse strings, if you will, and they felt that was kind of an affront to them. So that's essentially what happened to Constellation, but it kind of lived on, if you will. It kind of got zombified. It still was sort of lurking around in the background, or at least its architecture was. And if you look at the current Artemis program, it's almost the same thing. One of the elements, the Orion capsule, is a carryover from Constellation.
absolutely. But I guess how confident are you that we'll actually get to the moon this time?
Well, after Artemis 1, I think that kind of hangs the tail on the donkey, if you will. I think we're going to get there. I don't know if we're going to get there in the prescribed timeline because of certain mitigating circumstances. If you want, we'll go into that here. But I know the administration wants to get there, or at least NASA wants to get there. by 2026, but I don't know if all the pieces of the puzzle are going to be there at the time. But according to what I have heard thus far, NASA will proceed with a mission with the hardware they've got. So Artemis 3, which is the planned return to the moon, may not be it because of, well, again, certain mitigating circumstances, which we won't get into here. But I think eventually we're going to get there.
Oh, that's good. Now with my project, I go up to people fishing on fishing piers, waiting for bus stops, drinking their coffee at the cafe, uh, you know, people taking their smoke breaks, and I ask them if they know that NASA's planning to go back to the moon. Would it surprise you that I would say 8 out of 10 have no idea that we're going to the moon?
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, shoot, I'm in my comings and goings. I always carry my iPad with me. In fact, a true story. I went to this was a while back ago. I went to City Field with my nephew, and I carried my laptop with me, and I have some space related polo shirts and t-shirts and what have you, and I wore one of those. I think it was a NASA Wallops polo that I had, but I got questioned about it because somebody saw the polo shirt, and it always starts a conversation, which I kind of like. But you'd be surprised that not a lot of people knew about the Space Launch System. Everybody thought that pretty much shuttle was over. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. That the space program was pretty much over when the shuttle program ended. And I think that that had a lot to do with the fact that I think NASA was a little too successful at getting the word out that the shuttle program was ending. And it kind of gave the feeling that the whole program was ending, or the whole, human spaceflight program was ending. And everything was going to be turned over to Elon Musk at the end of the thing, which, was nothing further from the truth on that one. But you'd be surprised when I tell people about, Artemis and so on, and it still strikes me, even after the unpiloted successes that we've had in planetary missions, and even with the commercial crew program, people still think Elon Musk is in charge of our space program, and that NASA's finished.
I guess, what kind of risks do we face with the public, a large percentage of the public having that perception?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Oh, do you think it poses any problems to continuing with the NASA and human space exploration, if a large part of the public has that perception?
Well, that's a perception problem that NASA and its public affairs apparatus and folks like you and me have to go ahead and combat. And I thought Artemis 1 would have been the perfect wake up call to kind of shed that belief, but unfortunately, it's sadly it's still out there.
Well, I think they were trying to with the first attempt, and then whenever that turned out to be a delay, then the second attempt they were like, "Oh, we let people know about it, and maybe not." And then third attempt, they're, we'll tell people after it's done, type of thing. So I, it feels.
Maybe. I think NASA really appreciates the fact that it does get eyeballs when they do something spectacular. And indeed, the Artemis 1 mission was spectacular, and it was an amazing success as well. And we were testing essentially the real equipment that's going to get us to the vicinity of the moon. Orion isn't going to land, but it's going to bring the crew over to the lunar surface, much the same way the Apollo Command Service Module did. So yeah, you want to go ahead and make sure that the eyeballs are there, and maybe I don't know what the problem is. I mean, they basically own the internet, if you will. If you've ever been on Twitter and follow any of the NASA channels, they pretty much cover the whole thing. And there's a whole army of folks out there on social media trying to get the word out. If you still believe that NASA is more moribund, even after all of that, I don't know what to tell. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. I mean, like with Twitter, probably for you and me, we're loaded up with space news and NASA related stuff. But whenever I ask people, what could be done, what could NASA do to get the word out, they're like put more on social media. And I'm left with realization that everybody's Twitter feed is completely uniquely tailored to them. And
But what the problem also I think NASA faces is the fact they can't advertise. I mean, there was a lovely PSA that was created a few years ago. It featured a small child trying to grasp a soft ball Mars, and basically saying that this is this is what we're grasping for, and this is why. I thought that particular PSA was wonderful. However, I think it was only shown in a movie theater once, and that was really about it. You can find it out there too, I think, on YouTube if you look hard enough. But because it's a government agency and because of certain mitigating circumstances, NASA cannot go ahead and advertise itself. And to be honest with you, I don't think social media is the complete answer to this, because as you pointed out, everybody kind of lives in their own bubble. I mean, there's even on social media. I mean, you can name your topic du jour, and everybody kind of travels into that same ecosystem. And you and I travel in the space ecosystem, and there are folks that travel in the political ecosystems and the nature ecosystems and so on. And it's kind of difficult to bridge those gaps. But I will say that NASA has been fairly successful in the area of social media. In fact, so much so that in the nascent days of social media, a lot of businesses were trying to imitate their secret sauce.
that's a good point. Uh, just kind of thinking about where all this leads us. When you think about the future of humanity, say like 200 years out, what does that look like to you?
Oh, wow. I would love to go ahead and speculate on that, but it relies on so many factors right now. And I have no idea where we're going to be geopolitically 200 years from now. I mean, I guess really that's what kind of makes it all matter. Um, I know where I mean, there are two visions that there's a few visions out there that people kind of look at from science fiction. There's the Roddenberry sect, which kind of looks at things from Star Trek's point of view, where we'll grow up and finally get our act together. And then there's the future of the that J. Michael Straczynski paints in Babylon 5, which is still almost just like today, if you will, except with people from other worlds. And then there's there is the Mr. Corey sect, which looks, if you've ever seen the television show The Expanse. And to be honest with you, I think that's where we're probably gonna go. Most likely, where we're kind of mining things, but not delivering this back to Earth, because it's just right now, I think it's just not economically sound to do it. Maybe it will be in 200 years, but I don't know, politically where things are going to be. I know where I would like them to be, but if you subscribe to the the Roddenberry point of view, it took a great conflagration to get to that point.
Hmm.
And if you look at the calendar and what Roddenberry figured what was going to happen, we're almost there, you know. So I would like to think that we would probably get to that point without the conflagration. I don't know if we're going to be, traveling at the speed of light, and they'll have to, as Robin Williams said, they'll have to lose our luggage beforehand. But I think we may see a actual city on the lunar surface maybe in 200 years. It's self-sustaining, totally cut off from, well, not totally cut off, but its own little self-contained city. I would like to see that possibly on Mars in 200 years. I don't know if we're going to get there. I know Elon Musk wants to do it tomorrow. Good luck with that. But I'd like to see that happen in 200 years. I wish I was around to see it. But I'd also like to see too where we're going to be, and if I'm able to be thought out, and if I die and am able to be thought out in 200 years, although I'd like to see what happens and see who was right.
That sounds good. Gene, could you give me just a couple of minutes? The charging just got completed, and I just want to drive just a little place so somebody else could get into the charging spot.
Okay, sure.
Okay, I've just put on hold real quick.
No
Let's
worries.
see. Okay, let's see. Yeah. So, one of the reasons I started this project was I thought that this decade would be very transformational with space travel. Like at the end of the 2030s, what we would be doing every day would be unimaginable at the beginning of the 2020s. And I was just wondering if you thought this decade might be such a transformational decade, or kind of how you're viewing it.
Well, you're talking to a child. When I was a child, I grew up with 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I thought, geez, that's going to be me when I grow up. Oh, not quite. Didn't quite live up to expectations. Do I think we're in a transformational point in spaceflight at this point? Yes, I think because of the private-public partnerships that are going on. I think that's being transformative because I think it's helping to bring the costs down. It also could add to, it could add some time, however, to the expectations. Case in point, both commercial crew providers were, late. I know SpaceX was about 38 months late in their first launch, and Boeing is still working on their first human flight. But once they get both of those get going, I think that's going to again bring the cost down. And I think too we're kind of looking at once the commercial LEO stations start moving, I think too that's going to be transformative, because you're going to have NASA not as running the stations, but they will be just another client coming on board to do experiments, and again contracting out to either SpaceX or Boeing to go ahead and take them up to one of these destinations. So am I seeing transformative stuff? Yeah. I mean, a lot has changed in just the past 10 years in our approach to space flight since the shuttle program ended. It's an exciting time if you want to take a look at it that way, where companies are starting to get into the mix as well, and supposedly that'll bring the cost down. And so far, we'll just have to see how that all plays out. So I think we are in a transformative era because of this private-public partnerships. Where that's going to lead, I think it's going to free NASA up to do really the hardcore exploration. that they've always wanted to do with human spaceflight. And as you know, the both SpaceX and now a consortium of companies led by Blue Origin are creating the new landers. So NASA won't own the landers; those companies will, and they will be contracted out to deliver our astronauts to the lunar surface. So uh, we're seeing a new way of doing spaceflight, and I think that because of that, that's going to be extraordinarily transformative.
Yeah, and specifically, I keep thinking about Starship in terms of if it is 100% reusable and if it's the cheapest rocket to launch ever, just because of the fact you only have to use fuel and refurbishing it. Um, I was wondering, dude, how does that figure into your thinking about this decade?
I'm probably going to tick off a lot of people here, but I see Starship right now as a promissory note. It supposedly is going to do this, that, and the other thing, but it has to live up to its press clippings, so to speak. And to me, it is still in a developmental phase. And until they can get out of that developmental phase and into an operational phase, and by that operational, I mean having a few flights under your belt, I want to see how it's going to perform after that. I know there's a lot of promise about it. I know there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of hope for it, but I want to see. I'm from Missouri. Show me. It has to. I have to see it happen in order to really, really, believe that it's going to do all of this. So I'm going to be on the sidelines watching as far as Starship is concerned. I take a little bit. I'm probably not taking the popular approach. I want to see how it's going to perform. I want to see if it's going to live up to everything, and if it's going to indeed lower costs. I know one thing that the company wants to try to do, which is use it as a replacement for an aircraft, and I think that's kind of I think that's kind of foolish to use a Saturn V class launch vehicle to get to Japan, to deliver 150 people to Japan. I think that's kind of a bit of a waste of resources, quite frankly. I know the whole thing behind Starship is predicated on the amount of launches it can do, and that's how they hope to become profitable. But I don't know. You have to be realistic too. And again, I'm waiting. I really do want to see it deliver on a lot of its promises, but I'm reserving judgment until it starts to become operational. And to be honest with you, I just like Jim Free and Wayne Hale, who said during one of the NASA Advisory Council human spaceflight meetings, both are kind of concerned on the progress of the lander. The lander is kind of the long pole in the tent for Artemis, and right now I too fall into that camp. I want to make sure that it gets delivered on time and that it's going to live up to everything that it wants to do. But again, I don't see it being delivered in the 2026 time frame, especially given the performance of what occurred at Boca Chica a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I know that was not the most encouraging thing that they did.
No, no, it wasn't. I mean, everybody's, a lot of the fans of the company basically were very, very hard on the press because they said, well, the vehicle exploded and all this. Well, yeah, it exploded. Well, it got off the ground. Well, yeah, it got off the ground, but did it finish the mission? The answer is no. So in my eyes, yeah, the mission was a failure. Did you learn something? Yeah. Did you get a lot of data? Yeah. Take what you learned, go back, figure out what went wrong, fix it, go fly again. But was it a uh, was it a success the way the company is trying to paint it? Absolutely not.
And you mentioned you're from Missouri, and for somebody who's followed, I know the Show Me State and stuff like that, but for somebody that's followed space for so long, I mean, uh, you had like the promise of the space shuttle doing like 60 flights a year and being nearly 100% reusable, and kind of how that turned out. And then we had the what was it at the end of the or and during the Clinton and Gore administration, it was
That
like the
was
Venture store.
Venture Star, and it never really got off the ground. There was I'm trying to recall the whole story behind it. I remember when it was introduced at an International Space Development Conference. There was a whole big session on it. I think Tom Mattingly, the former astronaut at that time, um, was working for Lockheed Martin and actually gave the presentation on it that day. Uh, I'm not all that sure about what happened with that program. I know there was a lot of promises, and we know what happens with promises. And again, with the shuttle, um, it was being advertised as a replacement for all of the expendable launch vehicles. In fact, I believe the United States was starting to wean off of all of the ELVs at the time of Challenger. So, I mean, the shuttle was such a sophisticated vehicle for its time, and it became very, very clear as people were starting to operate it that I would really never get to the launch rate that they were hoping for. And also, I believe too, there was a motion to try to privatize the shuttle before the Challenger accident as well. So this privatization path that we're going down now, this ain't the first time that NASA's played with it. But again, it was becoming very, very clear that the shuttle was not going to live up to that. But am I going to go ahead and criticize it? The bird flew. We learned a lot from it, and I'm probably one of the biggest shuttle huggers out there. But it also had the unfortunate thing of keeping us in low Earth orbit, I think, for an extraordinarily longer period of time than we really, really wanted to be.
Now, whenever I talk to people about us going back to the moon and they didn't know about it, usually they ask, why are we going? Why now? What do we hope to accomplish? And I know, I mean, I've uh, read over NASA's science objectives, and there's a variety of reasons for us to go back. But when you're explaining it to people, what are some of the reasons and explanations that you find connect that uh, with other people?
I think um, this is going to be a two-pronged kind of explanation. Um, and it's also I'm probably going to reach into the NASA brand. As well. It's probably one of the only government agencies people have a lot of faith in these days. I mean, you just show a small child, uh, a NASA decal, and you give that to them, and which I've done, because I always carry some little tchotchke that I've picked up at some NASA centers, or whenever I'm covering a launch, I pick up some stuff and I take it back home with me, and give it out to some small kids that I run into that their parents have asked a question, or they see me wearing a NASA logo, and I just give them that stuff. But I think that alone tells you it's just, as far as the inspiration factor, even the most jaded adult, when you tell that individual that we're going to go we're going to put a human on the surface of the moon once more. I think still there's still even a glint of you still see that glint of excitement in their eye, that the the human condition is not as dire as people think. Humans still want to go off and do great things, and we're still capable of doing great things. The news tells us every day of the horrors that humans are capable of doing, but this tells us of the good things that humans are capable of doing, and I think maybe that has a lot to play into it.
Now, if you had the opportunity, well, I guess first of all, inspiration for, um, I mean, that just sort of popped out of nowhere for me. I was just curious if it was the same for you.
Well, as far as popping out of nowhere, I knew there was a contest going on. Uh, One of the individuals that I do the podcast with, Dr. Kat Robeson, she's pretty. She's an acquaintance of Cyan Proctor, so we were, between us guys, we were kind of hoping that she would get the nod. I know she was one of the contestants, and we were keeping our fingers crossed that she would get the nod, and we were very, very, elated when she did. Uh, Again, that was kind of a paid deal, but it did, and it rewarded individuals that were on a certain platform, by the owner of that platform. But it basically did, wake up a lot of people, and made people think a little bit. I also, and I know it did a lot for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, which is also a good thing. But you have to wonder, and this is again just me talking, if how much did the mission cost uh, the owner of the company, and what would have happened if he just wrote the check to St. Jude. I'm just throwing that out there for consideration. I know one of the gentlemen I do the show with, Mark Ratterman, asked the same question. But from an aspect of human inspiration, yeah, it took four folks that had never had this experience before, and had those individuals that were just sort of samples of cross section of folks that used a platform, and they all came home to talk about it. And I think that kind of really, really stirred emotions in people. And if it got people thinking about space and human space flight in particular, then okay, fine, more power to them. And I'm glad they had that experience.
And I guess in terms of its follow-on missions with Polaris Dawn, uh, I mean, what do you think about that? Having the first private spacewalk, um, and I'm trying to remember some of the other goals that they have. I guess the first crewed flight of Starship is one of them, but um,
Yeah, I'm gonna reserve judgment on that. I know uh the whole Polaris thing, that they've also delivered a proposal to reboost Hubble and all of that. I think I think what they're doing is they're basically testing a lot of stuff that SpaceX wants to be tested at their expense. That's just kind of the way I look at it. I do see the need for testing these things, because obviously people are going to be using these suits in the future. Um, if they're going to go ahead and be used on one of the corporate space stations that will succeed the International Space Station. But that's kind of when I'm seeing, something looking for a purpose, rather than a whole mission or a whole purpose around a program. for instance, the idea to reboost Hubble, it was just kind of offered to NASA, and NASA kind of entertained it, or is going to entertain it. But it wasn't something that NASA really asked for. They were, they were contemplating their own, unpiloted plans. In fact, if you recall, early on when we weren't too sure that that last servicing mission, STS-125, was going to fly, NASA was looking at a robotic servicing mission. And from what they saw, that indeed it was possible to do. But to me, Polaris the whole Polaris thing is kind of a mission looking for a purpose. I hope everything goes well with the test of the SpaceX EVA suit. We need that, but I'm going to withhold judgment on the whole thing, on pending further study. I guess that's the best way I can put it.
Now, talking a little bit more about international cooperation and going to space, not just as an individual country, but as more of humanity.
Mhm.
With Apollo, it was 100% an American program, and we landed and we said for all mankind. With Artemis, we got the service module that's built in Europe. We have Gateway with modules that are going to be built by a variety of countries. We have Japan providing surface mobility on the lunar surface, and a whole bunch of other things. And then just looking at the International Space Station, yeah, I mean, it kind of was conceived in a very unique time from a geopolitical standpoint, and it's amazing that we've been able to keep it going and despite everything. But it it's really amazing. And then China, we've completely closed the door to.
Mhm.
Whenever you're, and then India is sort of doing their own thing, and we have some projects, but there's like nothing on the human spaceflight side. Um, I was wondering if what you thought about international cooperation and engagement, and how that fit into your view of space.
Sure. Um, as far as international cooperation is concerned, yeah, we need to go ahead and go with our friends, because quite frankly, space flight is expensive these days, and especially human space flight. It's awfully expensive. And if our friends want to help uh, with the bill, I think that's a good thing. It also is a way for the United States to project what Jim Bridenstine used to call soft power. It's a way to go ahead and show our allies that we can still be trusted with large programs. And we can go ahead and invite them to participate in those large programs in quite a meaningful way. And it's a way to go ahead and keep our friends and keep them, really in our fold, in bold endeavors. So from that aspect, from our friends aspect, I think that's a good thing. Now you talk about Russia and the ISS, and all of the fun that happened with that over the years, unfortunately, because of the invasion of Russia by Russia of neighboring Ukraine. I think everybody over there has behaved exceptionally well. I think everybody has kind of kept their eyes on the prize. And indeed, when you're orbiting some 250 miles above us, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and literally you're dependent on everybody on board their station. Not that station is dependent on each other with literally their lives. So that kind of trust in your fellows is still there. Now you mentioned China, and I'm going to mention trust. And the reason why we're not doing anything with China is that the trust that I've talked about, that has to be earned. And unfortunately, because of the geopolitical things going on between the US and China, that kind of trust does not exist. Do we have to go ahead and play with them in certain cases? Yes, because there has to be deconfliction of paths and so on. I believe we had to talk with the Chinese with um, their Martian probe and all of that. Whoops.
Yeah.
And all right, no worries. I'll get back in. 3, 2, 1. There was some deconfliction that had to go on with their probe and one of our probes. I think it was Maven that was also on the same kind of course. So we had to deconflict the courses there, and there had to be coordination there. So we do coordinate with China on some level. And of course, with space situational awareness, you've got to go ahead and have that kind of cooperation. China doesn't seem to want to go ahead and provide that kind of cooperation. Um, when you talk about human spaceflight, there has to be that level of trust, because you're literally trusting each other with the lives of your people. And that trust right there just does not exist between the two nations right now, and that trust has to be built up. As far as India is concerned, they've decided, they are talking about flying their own mission, but I think they decided to go with Russia as far as their training, rather than going with the United States. So I think that was a conscious decision by India. Are we cooperating them? Yeah. I mean, we've got an Earth science, an Earth observation satellite that's going to fly out of India in the not too distant future. So that's one part of cooperation. So we are cooperating with India. We do have some joint programs there, but I think India wants to call their own shots. We did support their Mars mission with the Deep Space Network, and we continue in some instances to do that. So there is cooperation there, but are we going to see an Indian astronaut flying on the International Space Station? I don't know. That may, and considering how long the ISS has got, I don't know if that's going to happen. But I think India wants to fly their own ship first. But again, I think that's a conscious decision by India that they chose Russia to go ahead and help with the training of their astronauts.
Gene, if you could, would you take a trip to space?
Yeah. As long as I was there, not as a sightseer, where I would have a purpose, even if it was to just simply take photographs of certain sites, in Earth orbit. Would I want to do one of those pop gun missions that Blue Origin is doing? Again, I'd do it if I had a purpose to be there. If I was offered a seat, yeah, I'd go tomorrow, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, even though it would be kind of fun to do. But yeah, I would want to be there, but I would want to be there with a purpose, not just to have my nose plastered against the window. And I guess I just want to make sure that I can contribute something, rather than just being, well, ballast.
If you had the opportunity to go to Moon or immigrate to Mars, would those be things you would consider doing, even though that may seem unrealistic right now?
Well, immigrating to Mars, you're gonna have to really give me a reason to go. It's the same impetus that people had to immigrate to the New World. People like my grandfather and my great grandfather. They were all looking for opportunities. My grandfather from Italy, and my great grandfather from oddly enough from Poland. So it was, they were all looking for better opportunity, a job, and a way for their family to just have a better life. And if that was the impetus to go to Mars, yeah, okay, fine. I would go. But there would have to be really, really a motivation for that. As far as a lunar mission is concerned, yeah, I'd love to go. But again, I'd love to go if I had a purpose and I was trained, to collect samples or do science or contribute somehow to a scientific endeavor. I wouldn't want to just be ballast. If I was there to help operate a permanent base there and I was part of a rotation, yeah, sure, I'd go in a heartbeat.
That's awesome. Well, Gene, those are pretty much the topics I wanted to discuss with you. But if you had any questions for me or anything else that you wanted to add, I kind of see this as being um, my target audience are people that live 200 years from now to kind of look back on what I think is going to be a transformational decade. So if there's something that you want to talk about that we didn't cover, love to go into it with you.
No, I think you covered all the bases. I think there is a promise for the future. Beside, if we don't manage to do something stupid, I think there is a promise for the future going forward. I see I see the beginning spark of something here. But where it's going to go, who knows? I just want to be around to at least see the beginning of it unfold, and if this is going to be stored for future generations to go ahead and take a look at. I hope you are living in the future that we tried to create. I hope it's a hopeful one. I hope it's one that we would be proud to live in ourselves, and I hope it's as bright as we hope that it will be.
Well, Gene, thank you so much for your time, and it was such a pleasure to get to talk to you and to kind of understand how you've experienced and see humanity's place in space.
Nathan, it was it was my privilege. I had a real good time talking with you, and I'll give you guys I'll give you and your project a little plug on the next Talking Space, and I wish you all the best with the project, and hope it comes to hope it really really lives up to the purpose that you want it to. And if it's recovered sometime in the distant future, again, I'm just hoping that it's the future that we're keeping our fingers crossed for.
Well, thank you very much, Gene. You have a good evening.
You too, sir. Good night. It was an honor. Bye bye now.